Hi, this is Andy. By now you've likely played around with ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other generative AI tools available today. And some of you, like me, might be using them on a daily basis. You've likely seen what I have, that the tools are incredible at doing some things and yet head scratchingly bad at other things. And regardless of the good or bad, you can't help but wonder, where is all this going? Where are we headed? And how can we prepare for that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Nada Sanders. Nada recently co-authored the second edition of her acclaimed book, The Humachine, which has the subtitle AI, Human Virtues, and the Superintelligent Enterprise. Dr. Sanders is an internationally recognized thought leader and expert in forecasting, global supply chains, risk management, and human technology integration. Her expertise is identifying best practices in forecasting, developing an enterprise technology strategy, digital transformation, and creating resilient supply chains. In today's discussion, you'll learn what Nada means by the term Humachine, and by the way, what it doesn't mean. You'll learn about Kasparov's law and Moravec's paradox and why they apply to you. And before we're done, you'll get a glimpse of what the future might look like with increasing human technology integration. And perhaps most importantly, Nada will share some insights on how you can prepare for that world. This is an important future-looking discussion that I can't wait to share with you. Hey, quick note, I want to invite you to join our Lead 52 family. It's a global group of leaders who are committed to transforming our ability to lead and deliver. It's 52 weeks of leadership learning delivered right to your inbox, taking less than 5 minutes a week, and it's all for free. Learn more and sign up at getlead52.com. Thanks. Let's jump into our discussion with Nada about her new book, The Humachine. Dr. Sanders, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Hi, Andy. Thank you for having me. Really happy to be here.
I've been looking forward to this. A lot of us have significantly engaged more with AI since ChatGPT popularized generative AI, but you were like way ahead of the game. So when did this human technology integration and AI start to intersect with your passion for forecasting and global supply chains?
It's a great question. So my area, as you had mentioned, has been forecasting within the supply chain and enterprise context. And, I'm rooted in quantitative models. Years ago, at the early start of my career in forecasting, we were using neural nets, a lot of different mathematical models. But as I worked with companies, and this is now again in forecasting, what you realize very quickly once you start working with companies is that forecasts are actually made by humans for the most part. Certain things are automated, of course,
Sure.
But it's that interaction between algorithms and humans, statistical models or humans. So I've been doing this for a really long time. Those algorithms eventually evolved into more complex analytics. We went from small data to big data and then eventually into AI. But the interaction between humans and technology is something I've been doing for really 25 years. It's just that the technology has evolved. Its capabilities have evolved. But I can tell you that at the end of the day, for so many reasons, that human element continues to really dominate and be really important.
Yeah, and that's a key part of your thesis on this. In fact, let's talk about the term Humachine, and I'd like to start with what it doesn't mean, okay? So what does it not mean? And then how do you like to describe the term?
Yes. So it does not mean an enterprise that is strictly governed and run by algorithms or AI. It does not take those algorithms and bring them into the enterprise and then have the humans, the people, either be discarded or be appendages. We see a lot of companies that they think they have to get on the bandwagon. They have to acquire technology. They have to acquire AI. And this has been the case for really a long time. It's just that, again, the AI has evolved. But the tendency has been get the tech, get the technology, whatever the competition is doing, whatever the popular thing, whatever, McKinsey or Deloitte or you name it, whatever is being talked about. about. We get that, and then we get humans that, well, they've got to adjust to it. That's really not what the Humachine is. The Humachine is the enterprise of the future, the successful, dominant form of enterprise that combines humans and technology. And here's the thing, in a symbiotic relationship, in a relationship where the strengths of one are leveraged by the other. And that actually means a really excellent process of integration that takes the best of we as humans can offer and then utilizes the best of what machines can do. Because the reality of it is machines are great at certain things, but guess what? So are we as humans. And I think that tends to be forgotten. So the Humachine is this really defining this form of enterprise, which there's really a lot to it, Andy, because it needs to have a fluid structure. This is people and projects podcast, as you know, projects. And really it is the way the business has evolved today. It's a very evolving, dynamic situation in terms of planning. And so organizational structures, which is one of the aspects of the Humachine, they need to be such, those structures that allow the organization to adapt, to evolve. And again, where the interplay between humans, it could be individuals, could be teams of people that work with the technology. And at any one point, one can dominate more than the other, but it really depends on what the need is. So it's really kind of, if you think about it, almost like an amoeba-like structure, right? That evolves and adapts. I think adaptability, without question, for enterprises is going to be the dominant, or is the dominant characteristic of the future. And the Humachine is just that. And it's one that uses humans and technology. And I think we use machines in kind of a broad context, right, but it's those two together, intertwined.
Yeah. You make it so clear in the book. When I first saw the title and I was first pitched on the book, I thought, is this cyborgs or robot?
Right,
whatever?
no.
Like, no, it's not that. No,
in
fact,
not at all.
I'd really like to get into something that I was not aware of, Kasparov's law, or am I saying it correct? Moravec
Yes.
paradox. Yeah. I think it's a brilliant way to build on what you just talked about. So how do you like to explain those and how do they apply to your Humachine thesis?
Oh my gosh, thank you for asking. So I happen to think it's really amazing. I personally don't think it's received the amount of attention that it should have received, because I think it's a really important insight. It's a really important insight for leaders, for CEOs, anybody who runs a business, for boards, for anyone, and then all the way down to all of us. And so Garry Kasparov, who's the grand chess master, he is obviously, the grand chess master. However, he's really recognized also as being the first person that lost to a computer. He lost a chess match to IBM's Deep Blue. He was beat out by an algorithm. And it was the first time he actually even lost a tournament. So he loses a tournament, it's to a machine. Subsequent to that, what he was very curious about is to see or to compare the strengths of humans versus machines using chess as the instrument. And I think people could argue, but I think there's a general consensus that chess is sort of this domain that kind of showcases performance expertise. And so he organized this tournament. This tournament had amazing chess players, all the world chess players. It had amazing algorithms. And then it had combinations of algorithms and chess players. And fast forward, the group, if you will, that won, who won the tournament? The tournament was won by two very amateur chess players and their homegrown algorithm. And after an analysis, it became clear that what the secret was the process. It was that this team knew the algorithm really well, and the algorithm got used to them. So it was really the process of how they worked together that was really the secret ingredient that outperformed the best algorithms, outperformed the best chess players. And the lesson that came out of that was that it is really the process of integration of a good worker and a good machine that outperforms an excellent machine and an excellent worker, which is huge. It's a huge lesson for everybody that has an okay algorithm, an average algorithm. And for those of us that might not be the rock stars of the world, but that are just ordinary people, an ordinary person and an ordinary machine, but it's the right process of integration outperforms a superior machine. And in this age, that is a huge lesson. It tells companies, look, you don't need to have the latest, the greatest, the most superior AI. What you need is you have to first focus on that process of integration. So it's Kasparov's law. And I have to add to this that we had Gary on the Northeastern campus actually 2 months ago, earlier this summer, and I had the opportunity to spend some time with him. And that was really, really fun for me.
Sure.
And I asked him on one of the conversations, I asked him, I said, well, tell me, given your experience, what do you think is going to be the success, the future for companies as we move forward? And he said, listen, it's going to be this. We have to be first humble enough to know that probably 90% of the time or 95% of the time, the machines are going to be better. Let it do what it's going to do. But we have to know, the human has to know when and how to interact with the machine, when to interrupt it, when to adjust it, when to augment the output. And he said that is the key factor that is going to make the difference between good companies, okay decisions, and excellent decisions. It's that 5-10%. And what happens is, and think about the skills that are then needed for the human element to really know what's going on in their business environment, to be able to interact, to be able to know, when do I jump in? When do I override? It takes a lot of what I've labeled in my book and my work, domain knowledge. We need domain knowledge. We need expertise. We need people with experience. And that ties into one of the many things, Andy, that I mentioned in the book, is that companies, I think a lot of companies are making the mistake of jettisoning, laying off. You've seen early retirement kind of layoffs. You lay off the experienced people because we're going to invest in technology. We're going to invest in AI and maybe hire a bunch of students coming, we need to have people that have experience of their business world, whatever that is.
Yeah. And if I had to summarize, it is a great summary, by the way. Thank you. Moravec, I think, was along the lines of, machines are good at some things that humans aren't, and humans are good at some things that machines aren't. I'm oversimplifying, but that's kind of the idea, right?
It's exactly correct. Yeah. So Moravec's paradox precisely says that. Moravec's paradox tells us that, exactly what you said, what humans are good at, machines are not, and vice versa. Yeah. And, one of the things as we are watching, observing, and we see Gen I that is becoming, these algorithms are becoming very human-like. We have to remember that this is all coded and programmed. These are still machines. Just because they sound like, they have the human voice, they have the human physique, we're seeing all of that. The fact is that those extra senses, we're very complex. A machine still cannot feel the air on their face. They cannot smell the rain and the dew and know what that's like. They can't connect. You know how and I think everybody listening knows this, there's certain people we connect with, right? And we talk about, and I'm sure, psychologists and counselors have done all this, but there's always that kind of extra element where, I just vibe with them. We really connected. It just, I don't know what it is, but and I could tell you, and everybody listening knows, a lot of business is done that way. A lot of final business decisions are made that way. And you cannot put your finger exactly on what that was. I mean, maybe you guys, the team went out playing golf, or, your kids went to the same school, or there's a bunch of different things. But sometimes it's just that you connect. Machines cannot do that. And we have to remember that. And so it's those human skills that are really going to be the winning factor.
So I'm trying to think of this through the lens of a frontline manager or a project manager that are kind of intrigued by this, because I think it is intuitive, but sometimes getting examples could be helpful. So I think of when I'm leading a project, sometimes the most difficult thing is not creating a Gantt chart. It's influencing that cranky stakeholder. Right?
Absolutely.
And I don't think an algorithm or a robot, at least as manifested today, is going to convince that cranky stakeholder, right? So that's an example of something that a human would be better at than the machine. Can you think of anything else that relate either one way or the other? The machine being better this way, or the person being better this way? If you think of if frontline supply chain analysts, perhaps, or maybe you can think of some colleagues even where you teach. Like, what is it that you see this dynamic of Moravec's paradox play out?
In so many ways. So, one of the things that as humans that we are good at is connecting very disparate things, that don't appear to make sense, that don't appear to be connected, finding solutions to those things. And as AI becomes commoditized and becomes standardized, it's precisely those kinds of things, that kind of creativity, that is going to be the differentiating factor. I can think of many, many things. And one of the things that I do mention in the book, and there are many examples, but, it seems so silly and so simple, but it's those, silly, yellow sticky notes, or the sticky notes of 3M that we all use. I mean, it's a great example, because when it was originally designed, you come up with this solution and you don't really know what the problem is. What are you going to use this for? So it's kind of cool, this glue, but it's not glue. It kind of sticks. So really 3M sits, or the creator sits with this for 3 years, right? We don't even know what to do with it until one day, I think that he was at church and he was, gluing on, something on his hymnal, and he's like, oh, wait, this is pretty cool. So you fast forward, that's a solution to a problem, and it's that you might not have found. It's a very creative answer, and that is something that made a lot of money. And there are other kinds of things that are the Slinky. Slinky is another great example. I like the Slinky example because that really takes it to where there's no problem there. It's just sort of feels good, and it's kind of fun, right? Play-Doh, right? So that is something that, as humans, what we find fun, what we find interesting. They're great examples because those examples, they have made a lot of money for a lot of companies. And so overall, it's the ability to connect things that seem illogical, that don't seem connected. And a lot of things that address our 3D, if you will, in this 3D space that we live in, those kinds of needs that are not obvious to AI, because AI does not exist in that space. And that's really a great example of Moravec's paradox. Reading a room, we are training AI in so many ways, facial recognition, of course, but there's much more to that. And Andy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, right now we've got obviously the political scene going on. Right. So, I'm sure, politicians go out, there's a vibe. Yes, there's facial expression, but there's a vibe and energy. And sometimes it's really hard to put your finger on it. Those are the kinds of things that are becoming more and more important. I do the same thing in the classroom. I do the same thing. I do a lot of corporate training. I do a lot of corporate speaking. One of the things that's really important when I'm doing a corporate talk, when I'm doing a keynote, is I read that room and I know what I'm going to be talking about, but I want it to be a great keynote. And a lot of it is kind of moving with the energy level. It's the content, yes, but it's also moving with the energy level. Like, it's really hard to read, describe, especially when you're talking about what we call, contagion, meaning that it
Mhm.
might be 200 people.
Right.
AI can't do that.
Right. So true. And whenever I'm kind of frustrated by AI, I try to remember this is the stupidest it'll ever be, if that is a term. It'll always get better. But like, I watched some of your interviews ahead of time to prepare for today, and you connect with people in a way that a robot, it'll be a long time before a robot can do it in that
Thank
same
you.
sort of way, And so I think I think it's important for all of us to kind of keep those things in mind, and to really, one of the benefits to get out of your book is just wrestling with Moravec's paradox of, wait, what is it that am I taking my identity and my value in something that really, let the algorithm do that, or let the tool do that. With this is what I really want to focus on. And so I even to the point now, Nada, where if I get an email and I'm like, that was AI generated. Like, how can we make sure our presentations, our emails, our things like that don't come out that bland? And so we can put our humanity even to how we not just present ourselves physically, but how we do it even in that way, right?
And you hit the nail on the head too. It is bland, isn't it?
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
is information, there is content, but it is bland. It doesn't have a personality. There's a little bit of it, but there are these nuances. And for me, I mean, sometimes it's really hard to describe what that nuance is, because
Yeah.
it's at this
It's human.
intuitive level, but you're not connecting with it. Um, and because again, it's increasingly becoming standardized, it's a great source. No, I take that back. I was going to say it's a great source of information, but I would say there's a couple of pieces to
Mm.
this. One, we have so many hallucinations that we have to be really careful of. So because of the fact that there's so many statements when you use Gen AI, and there's so much content, it is so verbose, and we all know that, right?
Yeah.
It's like chatty, just talk, talk, talk. It's like, really get to the point.
Right.
Uh, and so you have a lot of incorrect information that is oftentimes buried, and somebody has to know, an expert has to know. You have to look at this very carefully. So, I've played this game. I know a lot of people have probably done this, put my name in there.
Mm.
I said, who's not a Sanders? And you do it. I've done it multiple times, because remember, Gen AI, these are probabilistic answers. So
Mhm.
it's really, what people don't understand is that it's just really a series of words that are connected probabilistically. So I put in, who's not a Sanders, and the first, it'll kind of spit out a lot that is correct. So it's very easy to get into this kind of a lull where I'll go, oh, that's true. Distinguished professor, Northeastern University, PhD, Ohio State. And you just kind of go through. And it's kind of like the game, two truths and a lie, and you have to pick out the lie. So, and then the first time I did it, I got to the very bottom, and then it said everything was true and then it said she has worked with numerous companies, and it mentions a number of companies: Dell, Nike, Lego, and then it said, and she spoke, at the United Nations, or convention or conference. That is absolutely not true. I mean, I would love to
Congratulations.
speak at the UN. Right. But if you didn't know, you wouldn't have known that, because you would have been lulled
Right.
into the truth. So second time I put it in, and again, all this true. And then at the end, and she is the CEO and founder of this and this company. And again, something completely fabricated.
Yeah.
So I think that tremendous care has to be made in terms of, there's certain professions and certain decisions in certain areas where risk of something like this is so significant that we have to be really, really careful. Then there is the other part. You started at the onset and mentioned that my background is forecasting. And then I mentioned to you, it was forecasting humans and analytics and algorithms and so forth. And one of the things that we know with forecasting, and these are, these LLMs, these are also predictive models ultimately. we have to be very careful the kind of data that they work off of. Clean data is essential. Data that is historical data that also contains what the future might look like. What is essential with forecasting is that you don't run your forecasting models on forecasted data, but rather historical data.
That's interesting.
So it's not what was generated by the forecast, because that is when
Right.
you begin to get serious compounding errors. AI and all the AIs that you and I are talking about, when Gen AI and Open AI came out on the scene and so forth, have been generating their content based on the content that was made by humans, that's
Right.
available on the internet, that's been out there, human generated data, original data. But as time goes on, time evolves, that is going to be increasingly AI generated data. So what you're going to see is more and more AI, Gen AI, large language models that are creating their own predictions off of their own generated data. And the kind of errors, hallucinations we are likely to see are going to be very significant.
That's a good point. Yeah, so much we could talk about there. I'm thinking that because of the nature of our audience, with a lot of frontline managers, project managers, they're not necessarily the people who are going to say, "I'm going to take my company to become a Humachine," right? They're not at that level yet. But and you'd have to tell me whether this metaphor works. But are there steps we could take towards becoming a Humachinist ourselves, so to speak? Some maybe for ourselves, or some steps to helping our team. So at a very micro level instead of at a macro level.
Yes. So let me address the first comment.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with. I think that every team could be its own little micro
Yeah.
Humachine.
Yeah.
Every division, every department, every project that is designed, every startup. And what
I
the
like
key there is to not look at the technology as the panacea, but be very strategic and very careful. And this is the first part, in terms of the technology that you are acquiring, that you are using for your decisions, and then connecting, making sure that the process of how your team members are integrated with the technology is good. Now, what is good? Well, that's going to depend. It's going to depend on a host of things, right? In terms of, what is the size, but it could be two people, right? As like in the Gary Kasparov example, could be two people working with an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. We don't have to talk about Gen AI here. It could be the technology itself. That connection, how are they using it? What are the questions they're asking? How are they using the output? That is really important. When do they take that output and say, this doesn't make any sense? Where they can say to each other, Jen or Peter, this doesn't make any sense. Let's go check that out. Wait, I heard a rumor. I was at a conference last week. I heard from our supplier that their factory is going to be down, or their shipment is down for maintenance. We have to go in and make corrections. It's that kind of stuff. The Humachine, whether it's at the startup level or a small department level, is an entity where you have this connection, where you have not given the be all end all to the technology, but you are integrating it in the right way, where you know where to override. Bearing in mind that all decisions are not made equal. We all know that, 80-20 Pareto's law. There's a lot of stuff that you can automate in procurement and inventory control. Those are the pens and pencils and paper, that kind of stuff. But then when you go, or in marketing, and you have clients, some clients are really important. That's your 10%, your 20% that is bringing in the highest revenue. You do not relegate that to a machine of any type. You manage that. And then what happens is, and this goes back, Andy, to Moravec's paradox, we as humans are good at certain things. We're so good at them, but we get tired. You and I get tired. We get tired. And our attention span is limited. So we need to take those human skills and use them on the things that matter. Use it on the 10% of clients, 20% that are really important. Use it on decisions that are really important. Don't waste your energy on all the other stuff, because our attention span as humans is limited. We get tired and we burn out. Do not waste your people on the things that don't matter. Give them space and bandwidth in terms of time. Don't overwork them, because, you know, we've seen so much on the workforce side, Andy, as far as, what's happening with strikes, what's happening with with the quiet quitting and, all that kind of stuff. And the reality of it is, I think that if companies want to be really smart, if managers, business leaders want to be really smart, they're going to measure productivity in a very different way than we did, before Gen AI and before COVID and all of it, because what you're looking for is results. You are not, I believe every company, every board should look at results. And there are different ways, and I address it in the book, and I can, we don't have time to really go into it. I'm happy to come back and talk about it, but how we measure that output. And it's not about making somebody sit in the office for 8 to 10 hours.
Right. Absolutely.
That's just not.
Yeah. For sure. I suppose that should have been the case earlier, but regardless, it is a different way of looking at it. I don't think I've heard the term super intelligence. Maybe I'd heard it before, but you talk about it in the book where it just exceeds the human cognitive capabilities in just about every domain, as I understood it. But you also say near the end of the book that you're an optimist. So what I'm interested in from your perspective is, what are you excited about as we are on this path towards that? And maybe scares you is a little overly dramatic, but concerns that you have about the path towards superintelligence?
Great question. And I'll try to be as brief as I can, but, cause it's a combination of both, right? You asked me about what I was excited about and what I was concerned, and they're kind of, meshed together.
Right.
So, it's really exciting because I think that we need to open up the gateways to a whole new way of engaging humans and human creativity. I come from a STEM background, and this very, quantitative background. And I think through that process, we have wanted to become more like machines, to do analytical processing. But the reality of it is, I think that it's going to come back to the humanities and arts, and really creating mechanisms in companies to blue sky. And I love the term blue sky, to where we really find ways to become more human, to ideate in ways that are so much more significant, so we can come up with novel solutions that are rooted not in history, but because the history just alone is what AI can do,
Right.
but in some innovative ways. That is exciting, because I think, and that's what I'm working on. I'm working on, and I don't even know what that's going to be, but
Sure.
as I'm evolving, and I'm very curious about it, coming up with different ways in terms of training and being able to open up the boundaries for ideating, scenario planning, which is absolutely critical. When we come to forecasting, there isn't going to be necessarily one prediction, but many. And so then it's probabilities, likelihoods, and how are we agile in our structure to modify and grow with it. All that's exciting. The scary part is the dominant part of technology in our lives, from social media, that is consuming so much. And I think in the process, I mean, even if we look at Andy now, I mean, yeah, forget, TikTok that we all know about, and, social media issues that are taking away many of the human skills. In my interviews for the Humachine, I spoke with, so many CEOs and SVPs, and they've all told me that when they hire, especially the Gen Zs and the younger generation, a lot of those very natural human skills have atrophied. They're atrophying. The ability for me to look at you in the eyes, to read you, to have EQ, it's we've got to, it's just like anything that we engage in. Those skills are atrophying because we are trying so hard to become more like machines. And even in the process of, developing better prompt engineering, as we're all, prompt engineering, how do I work with the AI? How do I query it? So how do I ask it? Because I wanted to, well, it needs to wrap itself around me, not me around it. And in the process of doing that, I become more like it and lose some of my humanity. And that does scare me, because that would take us down a path that I think we're losing. We're atrophying the skills, the very skills that I think are going to be in demand in the marketplace.
That's it. And so many things that I'd love to talk to you about, but one last question, because we have a lot of parents who listen, and I think it applies to what you just said. This isn't the focus of your book, but can you think of ideas from your book that could apply to parents who want to prepare their children for the future that needs, for example, those skills?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would, and I'm a parent too, although my kids are grown. I think again, I focus so much on STEM growing up, and mathematics and computer science.
Right.
I really think that the skills of communication, of interaction, are going to be really in short supply more and more, and are going to be extremely important. So the obvious, I'm going to repeat something that we've heard 100 million times, limiting, I'm seeing movements in terms of limiting digital time, if you will, on smartphones and devices. I think absolutely essential. And I would really encourage parents to really get their kids engaged in sports activities where they get to work in teams, or theater, or things that foster engagement with other humans, whether it's teams, whether it's oral speaking, oral communication. I'm hearing that more and more, where it's a skill that, at the end, you have to present to your manager, present to your team, present to your board, your customers. And people are increasingly going, I'm just so used to looking at a screen. I think fostering those skills, developing those at a younger age, is going to be really important.
Yeah, well said. For those listening, we barely scratched the surface of the insights in this book. If you'd like to learn more about AI or human virtues and how it applies to superintelligence and the enterprise of the future, get a copy of Dr. Sanders' new book, A Humachine. I put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for this cast. So, Nana, thank you so much for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy, for having me.